Namaskar. We welcome you to our Women Empowerment series. Today we have here Ms. Shobana joining us from Small Differences. She's a founder of Small Differences and she has done a lot of social service activities. She is a well-known author and a poet.
Thank you very much, Naveena. Namaskar, and hello to all of you watching this. It's a very, very big honor for me to be on this series on women's empowerment from Yaha Live. So thank you very much for this honor, Naveena.
Thank you for joining us. Would you please share a few words on what are the different types of work you do?
Okay, so I'm primarily a writer. I write poetry and nonfiction. I also write short stories, and I'm very deeply influenced by Japanese short forms of poetry called haibun and haikai writing. And I run an NGO called Small Differences, where we work with extremely marginalized and vulnerable communities. I also work in the spaces of branding, advertising, and in education.
Would you like to share your writing with us today?
Oh, yeah, sure. Would you like me to read a poem?
Yes, please.
I will just read a poem that was actually picked by Gulzar Sal, and it appeared in the HarperCollins anthology called A Poem a Day. So he worked with 270 odd poets. He picked their work and has personally translated them. Just Married. 1. There is a new mark on my forehead, a bright red trail that spells the end of one journey and the beginning of another. Bloody ties, severed and recreated. My toe rings gleam and speak of the confines within which I must now live. Benevolent, gentle, obedient, giving, but never asking. Around my neck are heavy golden lockets to remind me that this bond now is divinity and I, its worshipper. Strange, all I'm asked is to forget is me. The 4th section. I am now used to him, his tastes and preferences, even the way he likes his tea or how he likes me to lie with him. I look twice in the mirror before he comes home, tuck away my flaws behind my ears, powder those blemishes, and perfume my daily sweat. I can tell by the way he crinkles his nose that the evening meal is a disaster and that I must make a mental note to erase the recipe, my favorite one, from my home. I must hush the mourning of my maternal uncle's passing and celebrate his promotion instead. And when I wear my favorite pink silk, he frowns and says he hates it. Thank you.
It's a very beautiful poem. It feels like you've listened to the voices of the many women out there. Their unsaid feelings, you have beautifully put it together in the form of a poem and you've shared, and Gulzarji has picked it up and he has published it.
Thank you. And that's a blessing that Gulzarji picked it up. It's a blessing. It's divine grace. There's nothing more to it.
So you are a founder of Small Differences, where you work with sensitive communities, people, and you're also working in the corporate sector for branding and advertising. So that kind of work, and you're also an author and a poet. How do you manage all this together?
Primarily, I work in every area that I am deeply passionate about. My first job was in advertising and branding, and I discovered that I really loved it. And my writing, because I write different genres, because I write nonfiction, because I write poetry, haibun, and short and fiction, one sort of weaves into the other. So it's very important for me. And running an NGO is something I do because for me, that I believe is the purpose of my life. It is something that is my true calling. And it's something that I do more for my need than anybody else's. I just feel that I must go out there and do something. That's about it. Yeah, so it is tough to manage, but being a freelancer in that perspective has helped because I have been able to sort of divide time accordingly. I'm not expected to be at work, commute to work on an everyday basis. So I think that has been an advantage. But I've also been, it also requires me to work from home all the time. So much before COVID set in, so I've been working from home or traveling when I'm working on my nonfiction books. So it does get challenging, but I think it's challenging for all of us as women, right? Any job, even being at home, homemaker's job is the most challenging in my opinion, really.
So true. I would like you to share some more words about the work you do at your NGO, Small Differences, where you're working with the transgender community, also along with other people who really require help and need, like young children and others. Please share more about that with us.
Sure. So we primarily started Small Differences, a small bunch of friends, started Small Differences in 2012 in March. And my vision was to work with the homeless, elderly, abandoned community because despite having such a strong family structure and a system of values that drives us all, um, there are the number of elderly people we see on the roads every day has only increased in the last several years for many reasons. So we started with a feeding program, and in 2014, I was introduced to the transgender community by a very good friend of mine called Anjali Ajit, who has been working with the community from 2004. And so what happened was we began to engage with the transgender community by entrusting them with the cooking of the food and distributing the food to the homeless. So, we were helping the transgender people get the ones that we were working with to get off the streets and have a stable income, and also serving the poor. We began working with the local hospital, taking care of the elderly abandoned people, the ones who are especially accident victims who've been abandoned by their families, by their children. And we ran that ward for about 4 years until COVID struck in 2020. Today, we are focusing on skill development for the transgender community. We're running a pilot project with the help of many friends where we we discovered that it was a very wrong approach to try and find jobs for them when we don't know what they're interested in doing. So we've identified a couple of women where one of them is actually training to be a lawyer. So we're helping her with her education and we're funding her. Apart from funding her, we're also mentoring her. One of them runs a talluvandi, right? A shop, a kiosk on the road. For those of you who are not familiar with Tamil, so we bought her vessels and helped her run this setup. She's got a certificate now in catering technology, and we're trying to help her set up her own small little place. Another one of our transgender friends wants to be a fashion designer, so we're routing her through proper tailoring program, and then we're looking at setting up a small boutique for her. So these are all long-term plans. And our work during the pandemic has been in helping families, impoverished families, not just the transgender community, but impoverished families, and helping with medical supplies and a host of other things, basically to meet the challenges of the pandemic. So we've been focusing on that. We did work with HIV affected children for a very brief time, but we want to kickstart that again. So a lot of it is still it's a work in progress, Naveena, because we also discovered at the moment you go out, there are so many needs that need to be addressed. So we want to grow organically. That's what we're a registered trust with a board of very eminent trustees. So I'm very grateful to the guidance that I received from all of them time and again.
So beautiful. You are doing so much work, not only for the transgender community, you're trying to give them a voice, you're trying to give them a life of their own when the other people in the community are still trying to open up and trying to understand where they come from and support them. It's a very big thing that you're doing, as well as supporting children and the homeless people, feeding people and working for people during pandemic. These are all very very deep causes that you have taken up per se to work for and help people out. It's quite amazing. Small differences making a huge impact in people's lives. That's what we need everywhere, I would say. So you're doing a really awesome job. You said that this was you are fulfilling your life purpose by choosing to work in small differences because that's what you feel you wanted to do. Where did you get this inspiration from? How did it come to you?
It definitely came from my parents. My grandfather was a Gandhian, and my father has always told us the story where, and they lived. My grandfather moved to Ooty when he was a very young person, so we are all primarily from Ooty, and you know how cold Ooty must have been in the 1940s, 1950s. I mean, it is still cold compared to the. It is of course a hill station, and the story goes where my father actually found a 2 rupee note back then, you know, in the 1940s, which was a big sum, right? In the 1940s. And took it to my grandfather saying, hey, I found this on the road. And my grandfather immediately took my dad, who was about 6, 7 years old, to the nearest shop and bought a blanket with it and found the nearest homeless person and gave the blanket to him. So this was a story, and I think my work with the homeless people came because of, and this is just one story. So there have been several stories like this that my grandfather had and my grandmother, you know, instilled upon my father. My maternal grandparents were also very, very large-hearted. So I think, you know, so much of what we are as adults is shaped by what we are as children and what we're told. So I think that the inspiration definitely came from there. So, I mean, but to put somebody else's need before yours, I think that was the lesson that my father wanted my brother and I to take home. And that's why it's so inspiring. You know, it may not have been very inspiring had they lived in extremely wealthy circumstances. It wasn't the case.
It was like that in those days. Many people were so giving. They would think of the other person, especially during independence struggle. People would think of others around them rather than themselves. That's where we all came together, united. I mean, not us per se, but our grandparents. They never saw any religion or culture, but they just came all together.
I've always been constantly amazed at the kind of generosity that people have showered on sharing what they have with the lesser fortunate and the marginalized communities. And the communities themselves. So this is one story that I always tell my team of volunteers is one of the days on many occasions when we take the food and give it to the homeless. There have been many occasions when they will say, I'm not hungry today. Why don't you find somebody who's hungry and give it to them? This is somebody who's living on the streets, who's been abandoned by their children, who has nothing, who's no roof over their head. They don't know where the next meal is going to come from. But the fact that they're not hungry now, and then that meal can actually go to somebody else, that has been enormously humbling for all of us working. You know, not to judge. We're so quick to judge, right? I think that's been the greatest lesson for us. Amazed at people I do not know. There are so many patrons today for small differences. I have never met them. Who diligently every month they will say, you know, this is my contribution. Please do what you want to. I've still not met many of them. So you know, this is a tradition we come from. This gift of this grace of giving. Would we have done it? I don't know. I'd probably brought it back to my house and kept it in the fridge, right? I mean, that's what we all buy fridges for. So that generosity, right, of the spirit of giving has been so beautiful.
As a woman who is taking care of her home, who's taking care of an NGO, who's taking care of so many people, is able to still find time to write her own poems and books and also work in the corporate career, what message would you like to give to other women out there? I know I'm not saying that other women out there are doing any less. They are doing a lot in their life also, but what is that one message you would like to give to others to help motivate them to do their best or achieve what they want to do or their dreams in life?
As women, we tend to be very hard on ourselves, right? We want to be we want to be good mothers, we want to be good wives, we want to be good daughters-in-law, good daughters, good friends, good neighbors. But we very rarely think about being good to ourselves, right? And this includes even putting our health at the backseat, because I have done that, right? Right through my 20s and 30s, I have worked 20-hour days, day after day, 20-hour days. And at 40, 41, when I was 42, my body just gave up. And I see this with as a common point of conversation with many of my classmates from college and from school, battling, early troubles of menopause and hypertension and the stress that we take on of everybody's troubles, right? The mother, the homemaker, the maternal figure becomes the central point for everybody, right? You're hearing the stress, you are helping your spouse alleviate his stress, you are helping your kids manage theirs, you are helping your elderly parents, you're helping your elderly. Who's helping us? There's really nobody, right? So I think that's one thing I would like to say. And I want to talk about, there's one friend of mine who is a psychologist, very dear friend of mine called Sheena, who always tells me that, self-care is not being selfish. Just think of, I think that's so powerful, because we think that if we take time for ourselves and say, you know what, today I'm not cooking, you guys can Swiggy a meal, it's okay. You're not measured by the number of meals you put on the table. We're measured by that the times that it's the moments, it's not the acts per se that make the difference. So that's one. And I also think as I grow older, I realize how much I have gained from my women friends. This sense of solidarity among us, right? We often forget that we are one half of the world. If there is a 7 billion population, we are 3.5 billion of that population is us, right? So why don't we look at this sense of solidarity and strength that we can draw from each other? Because during my most difficult times, it's my women friends. Today, my friends, my super women in my life are my friends. Some of them are my family members. And I constantly draw inspiration from them.
Namaskar, and thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very, very, very much.